What's up, you guys? Sean Ross, Sapp, and Giri here for the official Wrestling Inc. podcast. We're trying something new. As you can see, we're doing a video broadcast. So hoping to add another aspect in which you guys can interact with us. It'll help us get the podcast to you in perhaps even more timely fashion as well. But Raj, I know that you wanted to talk about Raw's declining ratings, and they are declining to a dangerous level right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when the ratings are the lowest since 1997, I mean, that sounds bad enough, but you got to remember in 97, you had competition from Nitro. So the total wrestling audience was about double basically what it is right now. And it's a scary thing. I'm shocked that there have been no real changes to the existing template of Raw and SmackDown and just pro wrestling television in general, that it's kind of staying the same old. So it's a scary time because at some point, the numbers are going to go up when football season's over a little bit. But next year, you're going to have this decline again and again. And it's something that I see myself, when there's a big Monday Night Football game, I'm like, I got to watch Raw for the site. But if I didn't have the site, I'd be tuning into Monday Night Football and DVRing Raw. And then when I see a 3-hour Raw on my DVR, and it's like, well, nothing really happened, I can delete it. And when you keep deleting it and then moving on, it's easy to see that pattern forming where you move from, being a wrestling fan to moving on.
Yeah, that happened to me with Impact. It became less consequential. And when I stopped covering it for the site, I was like, well, I'll still DVR it and watch it later. And then I didn't watch it later. I would watch it on YouTube and things like that. And YouTube is another interesting thing about this ratings decline, because it seems like a lot of people are turning to YouTube to watch the show, either via piracy, watching the show completely, but their individual video clips are very telling, and it's very telling as to who's over and who isn't. Like there's a guy, one of our readers, Ryan Mark, will send me the numbers, and it's very telling. Like lately, over the past month or two, Roman Reigns' numbers really huge. Dean Ambrose has some pretty big numbers. The Wyatts do decent numbers. Even the and then when they do different things, like Alberto Del Rio returning, big numbers. Kalisto upsetting Ryback did big numbers. It was something that they don't usually do. And Kevin Owens does good numbers when he's with somebody. They have to take a look at this. And I don't know if you heard this, but apparently Vince McMahon isn't worried at all about the ratings decline. Did you?
It shows. You haven't seen a change, right? I think Vince wants a product that that can survive on cruise control. So when he's not in charge, when he's not around, you got a product that can, it's like a franchise, like a fast food franchise, where you want to make it so it's easy to replicate and just survives, and it can do well. The problem is you're getting to a point where, when it's constantly decreasing, at some point you're going to hit a point of no return. You're going to hit as much as people want to say ratings don't matter, they do. The reason why USA Network is bringing SmackDown on is for ratings. The reason they have Raw is for ratings. Wrestling doesn't bring in money for advertising, so it's all about ratings. And if they're not, pulling their share or what they expect, it's going to lead to trouble down the line.
Yeah, I agree. And these ratings, while terrible for Raw standards, by traditional cable standards, not that bad at all. But definitely, I don't think this is what Universal expected when they signed this big contract with WWE.
Right. Yeah. There's an expectation because you're not bringing in the ad revenue from wrestling. Wrestling doesn't bring in, 4 million viewers from Raw is not the same as 4 million viewers from golf. Because if you're doing a show on the Golf Channel that does 500,000 viewers, you're still bringing in your Ferraris and BMWs and those kind of sponsors. Wrestling, you watch, you got Farmers Only and stuff like that. So you're not bringing in that kind of ad revenue. So you need the numbers to be high because it's the bragging rights that USA Network wants, and that's what's attractive to it. And if you're not pulling USA Network from number 20 to number 5 because of your ratings. If you're pulling them from number 20 to 15, then at some point it's like, what's the point? And they're not there yet, but ratings do matter, and you keep declining in popularity and not changing things around and not looking at what the problems are, you're going to get there.
Yeah, and like Raj mentioned, 3 million viewers for Raw. I mean, they'd be better off getting 1.5 out of a regular TV show, because, as you said, advertisers just don't seem to pay for wrestling ads. I mean, we see TNA and Ring of Honor do fantastic numbers for Destination America by Destination America standards, but nobody wants to advertise on that program because they think that wrestling fans won't spend money. I mean, you've worked a wrestling website for a long time. How do you feel about that? Is that correct?
It's I don't know. It's kind of true. You go to a football game and you see the crowd, right? And you go to a wrestling event and you see the crowd. And I'm not dissing wrestling fans. I'm just saying it's usually lower income. It's different. You go to an MMA fight, it's a lot of, younger fans with the, dressed up nice with the, and some, wearing the Affliction shirts and stuff. But normally it's a little, what's the word? What's the right term?
Well, I've known countless indie promoters that will run their shows at the beginning of the month because they know that's when people get welfare checks and things like that.
Yeah.
They have to do things like that.
Yeah, and that wasn't necessarily the case in the Attitude Era. I mean, the Attitude Era, you were bringing in college fans and higher income fans. So some of that stigma, I mean, it's definitely, there's a reason for it. Even with Wrestling Inc., when I ran Fightline, when I started it, and when I was running it, I would get a lot more in ad revenue per page view than I did with Wrestling Inc. So, it's a true stigma. And I don't know if all of it's well-deserved, but, when you see stuff like using Reed Flair's, death as an angle, you could see why a mainstream audience would look down on it,
The one thing I do worry about is, that was an envelope pushing deal for WWE. I hope that doesn't dissuade them from doing envelope pushing things, because I'm all for that. It just, it doesn't have to be in bad taste.
There's a difference between envelope pushing and tasteless, and just dirty. And, there's a difference between, Fallon and Springer. You can do stuff that pushes boundaries. You can do stuff that's edgy, that'll get people talking, without just, making people look at it and be like, what the hell was this? And why do people watch this? Or that's, like anyone that hasn't watched wrestling in a while and then watches that, they wouldn't know what they were talking about anyway, really, with Reed Flair. But if they knew the backstory, they'd be like, wow, okay, this is tasteless.
Yeah.
This is why wrestling is low rent. And it doesn't have to be that way. It's funny, at a time when they're getting more mainstream exposure than ever, as far as like ESPNs and all the Rolling Stone and all these guys covering them, you just don't need to do that. And they're less popular now than I can ever recall, maybe other than 1994, 1995, other than like those 2 years.
Yeah, I don't like that they try to appeal to the lowest common denominator. I don't like any show that does that, really. That's why I don't watch a lot of network TV sitcoms, because they're not funny. It's an insult to my intelligence. And I think a lot of fans feel that way by the way that the WWE show is put on, and to an extent, several other wrestling promotions, but specifically WWE, when they and I've mentioned this before, when Raw went to 3 hours, I was like, okay, cool. Because prior to that, you were having 4 or 5 minute matches. Nobody was getting over that way. But now I'm like, man, they really don't need that third hour, especially with a 2 hour SmackDown moving to USA.
I thought it was a mistake right from the beginning. I mean, one of the things that made pay-per-view special was that they were 3 hours. and the 2-hour Raws weren't making you wanting more when they were over as it was, week after week. Once in a while they would. You're just at a point now where you have no top guys other than Roman Reigns. No one that people, no one that's a difference maker right now. With John Cena out and Brock Lesnar not around. So it's you need. I mean, if you look at, and this is one of those things. So I just went to a movie with my family. We went and saw The Good Dinosaur, but Creed was playing, and I want to see Creed. I've been a Rocky fan my whole life, but you look at a Rocky movie, right? You don't have Drago. If Drago lost 4 times in that movie before he fought Stallone at the end, it would not have the same kind of impact, right? If you had Clubber Lang losing 5 times before his final fight with Rocky, it would not have the same kind of impact. It's common sense booking and storytelling that is lacking right now in WWE, as far as building top guys and protecting and not having guys losing over and over for no reason. And it's just one of those things that any show is not scripted this way, and only WWE. It's a weird world, and until they fix that, we're stuck in this problem. I mean, think about it. What would you do for WrestleMania?
Oh man,
seriously, your title match. I mean, you could do Reigns and Lesnar. You're just doing a rematch from last year, and you got a guy who's not over like he should be, and Lesnar, who realistically he's not working a full-time schedule. So would you give him the title again? And if not, then what is your WrestleMania match?
Good gosh, and you've lost so many important pieces. And I mean, Randy Orton, while not the biggest name, he may be out for a year now.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have Cena. I think you have to do Cena versus Reigns or Cena versus Undertaker. You have to have Cena against one of those two guys for a marquee match. I kind of hope that they would go the Ambrose Authority route and just have him quickly get tired of that. Then you could at least do Ambrose versus Triple H. I don't usually say this, but Triple H needs to get involved somehow in a main storyline like that. Because could you imagine Sheamus in a WrestleMania main event?
No, that would be a disaster. Look, you saw the ratings from last Monday, and if people were really interested in Sheamus as champion, this is a night after 2 WWE World Title changes in one night, and they did not stick around at all. And look, it was the highest rated Monday Night Football game of the season, but it wasn't gigantic. There's going to be higher rated games. So Sheamus, man, this the whole Drago thing. Why would you be interested in Drago fighting Rocky at the end if he's been losing the whole movie?
Yeah, and the thing is, they have a bad. I mean, like for instance, I think that the way that they've done the Jack Swagger Alberto Del Rio thing has been pretty decent so far. But the problem is, you got Jack Swagger who's been booked to win and then lose, win and then lose, and not even on Raw, but on Superstars. What's wrong with protecting a guy that's not going to be on your main program? Bo Dallas doesn't need that win on Superstars over Jack Swagger. Adam Rose doesn't need to beat Jack Swagger on there. That Jack Swagger has been over before, and you may have to rely on him at some point in a feud. Why not just put him over? That way, at least when he comes back to TV, you can have JBL say that he's been running through people on Superstars and itching to get back. But you can't say that because he's been getting 50-50 booked the whole time.
Well, I don't know if most people outside of the internet fans know that Superstars exists.
True.
They don't mention it ever. So they never show highlights from Superstars. So even Main Event, I don't think people know that those shows exist. So, they're it's one of those things where it's like, what's the point? But you really need 6 guys on top. 6 main event full-time guys that you can, you look at the Attitude Era, you look at any period where business was strong, and you have a lot of guys on top, whether it's, in the late 90s, you had Rock, Austin, Undertaker, Kane, Triple H, all these guys. I mean, in 2005, Edge, Cena, Taker,
Batista, Triple
yeah,
H as well.
Exactly. You need like 6 guys that are kind of protected around the top, not just one. And so far you've had Cena and Reigns, and that's it. You really need to have like 6 or 7 guys that are book strong, that you kind of keep away from each other. So when you finally do pit them against each other, it's a big deal. And I mean, if it were up to me, it'd be Reigns, Ambrose, Owens, Big E. I think you can make Big E a much stronger character than he is now.
I thought he was on his way, and then
he should
inexplicably it didn't happen.
Right, he should be. And I mean, there's a couple other guys. I mean, Bray Wyatt and Cesaro when before his injury, but you protect those guys. Work on. I mean, you have 30 writers. Have assigned 2 writers to each of those guys. That's and they have booking veto power. They're like, if they hear something stupid regarding that character, they're like, no, we're not going to do it. That's going to bring my guy down. And same thing in the mid card. You need like 6 guys that you're kind of pushing towards the top that aren't fully protected, but that you get them at the position where you give them a 2-month build and they could be in that main event level.
Yeah.
And, then you got a roster full of, potential top guys that, can move up in case of injuries and stuff like this. Because right now the show is at a point where it's the weakest I've ever seen it since the mid 90s.
I'm going to look up and down the Raw roster right now, and I'm going to mention some of these names. Big E looked like he was ready for something when the Ziggler split was about to happen. It didn't happen. That inexplicably, they didn't even have a real feud after that. And a Big E Ziggler match feud could have been good because Ziggler's the type of guy that can make sure that Big E is protected in the ring.
He can make Big E look like a monster.
Exactly. You have Cesaro, who was incredibly over during that Andre the Giant Battle Royal win. The next night, he was put with Heyman. It was a great one-night pop, but it didn't work out. Curtis Axel, they gave up on that. Don't think that was going to work anyway.
Yeah.
Damian Sandow has been in a couple of situations where he was incredibly over. One as a comedy act, which probably wasn't going to go anywhere. But before that, he was completely serviceable as a mid-card, upper mid-card type of guy with the gimmick that he had. That also went nowhere.
Yeah.
Daniel Bryan, not allowed to wrestle. That's out of his control.
You could use him. You could use him as a G. Look,
yeah.
The Authority storyline has been going on forever.
Why not have him as the Mick Foley?
Exactly. I mean, we have seen this exact storyline played through where the Authority's champion is running roughshod and the underdog babyface. And it's just been going on forever. They did it with Orton. They did it. Who else? There's Orton, Sheamus, and there was one, and Seth Rollins.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You meant the Authority's champion. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
That's why I thought the
storyline that's not going anywhere.
That's why I thought Triple H just saying to hell with everybody else, I got to do this myself would have been a much better because he's at least established.
Absolutely. And you could do something where the board of directors says, all right, the Authority, they have the power to fire and stuff and business decisions, but they want someone like Daniel Bryan to make the booking decisions on the show, basically the whole GM thing, and at least use him because he's not doing anything right now. And you are severely lacking star power. So why not?
Yeah. Then you have Dolph Ziggler, who was at one point one of the most over people in the company. And I think he just kind of got old and he needs something different. And they had a chance with the Rusev deal and it didn't happen.
I mean, last year at the Survivor Series, he was booked so strong. He had a ton of momentum. And I can't remember if it was the next night he lost or the following week, but it's just, that's the ongoing problem.
That Survivor Series match was booked so well. They knew that Ziggler could get the most sympathy, and they used that, and it was the right thing to do.
And it didn't follow up at all. I mean, Big E, was it like a month and a half ago where they destroyed Cena and the Dudleys and, were left strong. They could have done something there with Big E where, anytime New Day wrestles and Big E's tagged in, it changes the match. Like he's kind of the destroyer of the team. And he has the goofy side, tone it down a bit, but he's got the goofy side, but he's dangerous. And they
like a modern day Kurt Angle type of character where he would do silly stuff, but
right,
kick your ass too.
Yeah, absolutely.
He had the room to do that silly stuff because he could back it up in the ring.
Yeah, and you do that for a couple months, then you got someone that you could push to the main event level.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would 100% rather see Big E with the New Day as champion than Sheamus.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I was surprised they didn't put him in the tournament. Yeah. Another name, obviously, Jack Swagger. And no matter what they do to this guy, his chant is always over. He could be off TV for a year, come back, and the chant's still over at least. So there's that.
Yeah, I mean, he's one, he shouldn't be talking. Every time he talks, it
unless he's a heel, because the lisp is heat when he's a heel. That's the only way.
Right. Yeah. But as a face, I mean, he was over big with that feud with Rusev. It shows like the right storyline. And that's where maybe, they should have held off the Rusev feud and like built towards the Rusev feud and put him against some other, I guess they don't really have any of the foreign heels really, but doing something where you don't bury the guy right away.
I thought he was
momentum.
I thought that Swagger, I really thought in that Rusev feud, he was going to get a win over Rusev, but in a flag match where Rusev wouldn't be pinned. That way it wouldn't really hurt him because anybody can grab a damn flag off of a corner post. But yeah, that was such a hot feud. I loved it. The crowd wanted Swagger to win that.
Yeah.
You also have Kalisto, who looked like he was going to have momentum with that upset over Ryback. And I don't expect him to be a big main event type of guy or anything, but there's certainly something, in the giant killer type of deal. And they have plenty of giants for him to slay that they could have went with.
Yeah. I mean, Paul Heyman, you got Paul Heyman there and one of the great minds of wrestling, and it's not being used in a creative capacity. And that just shows the problems with the company. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the politics that doesn't allow Paul Heyman to be in a top level position creatively. Cause man, that guy, the amount he did with some shitty talent, we'll have to throw the explicit filter, but he made Sandman into a star. Sandman sucked, as far as wrestler went. And
I look back on some of those ECW shows and I'm like, man, some of that in-ring work, knowing I know now.
ECW is so overrated, for every Guerrero and from an in-ring standpoint,
yeah,
you had some great stuff that, I mean, to be fair, a lot of great in-ring stuff that wasn't being done at, during that day. But the stuff at the top usually was not that great, but Heyman created this atmosphere and the crowd bought into it to where, I mean, you'd see Taz and Sabu and think it was the biggest thing ever. And, you judge it just by the match alone. It wasn't that great, but he built it to this level where it felt like a huge event. And the stuff he could do with that talent, was just amazing. And, people rag on us, anyone, any wrestling reporter for reporting facts on TNA and where they are. But I was so excited at the possibility of Heyman joining TNA. Was that like 5 years ago?
Yes.
Because I thought that could be a game changer. And when that didn't happen, it just, blew the air out of the sails.
I really think that if Paul Heyman would have joined TNA instead of Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan, I think the wrestling landscape would look categorically different right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, it would be amazing. And he had some ideas that were like, I didn't like the idea of him firing everybody over 40 except for one person, because he said that was one of the conditions, but they needed a lot of those guys gone. And then you look at what happened after that. TNA brought in like the Nasty Boys and Orlando Jordan and Val Venus. And, you know, Val Venus was a pretty good worker in the ring, but, you know, he probably shouldn't have been going over guys like Christopher Daniels and Jeff Jarrett at that stage in TNA. Really weird. And Paul Heyman's not being used backstage. And like you said, I remember by the time ECW got on TNN, I was a teenager. I was ready for it. I knew what it was. I was finally going to get to see it. And the way the aura that he had built up for that brand was just incredible. And then he would have guys like Paul Varlins, who was a UFC fighter, never wrestled a match in his life, would go in there, and Heyman would use somebody like that to get destroyed by Taz and make Taz look like a larger-than-life character. It's...
Yeah, I mean, the great, you know, one of the great wrestling booking minds, you know, is Heyman, and it's not being used. With the greatest wrestling announcer alive today is Jim Ross. It's not being used. You know, it just shows, like, you know, kind of what's wrong with the business. You know,
I learned a lot just from watching like stuff from Paul Heyman, because I worked like, and when I say the lowest level indie, I mean the lowest level indie you can possibly get. The majority of the guys that work on these shows have had like 20 or less matches, but I'll never forget Paul Heyman saying that you accentuate the positives and hide the negatives. So we always do our best to put people in situations where they won't look weak. If they can't do certain things, you never have them do certain things. And that's what happens on WWE at the highest level of wrestling. They don't accentuate the positives and hide the negatives. They have a guy like Roman Reigns go out there and recap his promo. People don't want to be reminded. You're reminding people of shit that they weren't watching, that they didn't want to watch to begin with.
And it doesn't matter who it is. Could you imagine if Conor McGregor is doing an interview and then he's like, back in May, Jose Aldo came to me, you know, and starts recapping their feud? It would be like, what is this? You know, like, it's just not natural. It sounds it's just like, you know, you just roll your eyes at it when someone's recapping. If you had Peyton Manning, you know, recapping, you know, their rivalry with the Colts, it's like, it just sounds so ingenuine and just strange. So
could you imagine them interviewing Mark Sanchez before he just got his starting job, and he threw to a video of him fumbling off of his center's ass a couple of years ago, like they have like Dean Ambrose do? Like, he comes out there and he cuts a promo and he says, and then this happened. It's like, why? Why not show that video while they're walking down to the ring?
It's so unnatural. And I think that's the part of it is it's so hokey now and so overproduced that nothing seems organic and real. And it's you know, my wife was asking me the other night, like, if I didn't have the site, would I be watching, you know, wrestling right now? And it's like, I would be on some level, but I would not be watching it every week. It's 3 hours of Raw every Monday is a chore. It's a chore sitting through that whole show. And yeah, I mean, and I've been a fan since I was a kid and having a hard time with it.
This was pro wrestling is the only type of work I've ever really wanted to be in. I got into MMA because I was too small to be a pro wrestler and all that stuff. And then by the time I was big enough, you know, I was a little too old. But it was funny because the way that I actually started writing was a column for Bill Apter, and the column was based on the fact that I was starting to resent wrestling so much that I questioned whether I should keep watching it. And I gave myself from like it was January 4th, 2010, the Bret Hart return to WWE, until WrestleMania to decide if I wanted to keep watching it. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I would keep watching it.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, the fact that it was that close, and even today, and my fiance's asked me the same thing. Would you watch this if it wasn't your job? I'm like, I would probably just DVR it and watch things on YouTube and things like that. And it's nothing is must see anymore.
And when you start watching something just on DVR, it's so easy to stop watching it. You know, all it takes is a couple of weeks where you start skipping that show. And there's been plenty of shows we used to watch all the time. Modern Family. My wife and I loved that show for a while. And then we got to a point where we're like, it's all right. We'll just DVR it. And now it sits on our DVR and we delete it, months after it's been sitting there. So, and wrestling, it would probably be the same way. And now when when I went to the Denver Raw, or when I go to a Monday Night Football game or something, and I skip, I don't bother watching it. I just delete it.
Yeah. And like I went to Raw in May, I think it was. We kind of just, it was a 3 or 4 days before we decided to go type of thing. And I kind of dreaded it. I dreaded making the 1 hour trip to Cincinnati. And I was like, well, I'm going because it's near, but do I really want to go? I got cheap tickets, pretty cheap. Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm going to a Bengals game on Sunday, and I can't wait. I don't like waking up early, but we're waking up early. I'm excited to wake up early. I was not excited to leave the house at like 5 p.m. for Monday Night Raw. Even the live experience, yeah.
I mean, the Raw in Denver last month. The night before, I went to the Packers Broncos game, and I was so pumped for that. And then for Raw, I was like, and I got, WWE gave me passes, and I was still like, I don't know, like it was really like a last minute decision where I decided to finally go because, and I know a lot of people, we'll get criticism where people are like, oh, you guys just shit on WWE or you guys aren't real fans. Well, we know how great wrestling can be. We know how fun it could be. We know, and most people do. I mean, that's why they're fans in the first place. Because wrestling, when it's done right, is, in my opinion, the funnest thing in the world.
Yeah.
It just hasn't been done right in a while.
I look forward to very little more than the pay-per-view nights at Wrestling Inc. Like, it's weird because, I cover UFC, I cover Ring of Honor, I cover New Japan, but and even to an extent WWE on Twitter, but they're like nights off for me. It's because I know what's going to be on there is probably going to be really good. And it doesn't feel like work when it's like that. So, I mean, and even WWE's pay-per-views are usually pretty well done, at least decent. But I can't count the number of people that I've heard say, well, should I watch wrestling again? And I'm like, well, no, if you want to watch the pay-per-views, do that. Then just watch This Week in WWE on the WWE Network and you won't miss a thing. I mean, you watch those 30 minutes and that's it. That's all you need.
Yeah, when you got a 3-hour show, you could recap in 2 minutes. It's dangerous.
Yeah. Going back through some of the names, and these are just names of people that they've had at the top of, or at least had looked like they could be something. Mark Henry a couple of years ago cut one of the best promos I thought ever, the fake retirement promo, and then he was immediately beat. That was kind of weird.
Yeah.
You had King Barrett, who at several points of his career looked like he could be a good upper mid-carder. And
I think he could be a main eventer. He's a big guy who can talk, who's got the look. There's no reason why he can't be on top.
Exactly. Kofi Kingston looked like he was primed for a top of the card run with Randy Orton, and issues with Randy Orton stopped that. Kevin Owens looked like he could be just a monster heel, and probably still could. And at the time I was like, okay, losing to Cena won't hurt him, but it did hurt him.
It did.
It absolutely did.
I can't blame Cena. He's not, for all those, his feuds with Rusev and Bray Wyatt and Owens. Ultimately, it was the creative team that, and Vince. Ultimately, it was Vince that decided how those went. But all those 3 feuds hurt those guys more than it helped, I think. Imagine if Rusev had beaten Cena in the manner that Brock Lesnar did. Imagine if Owens won all 3. Yeah. Where would he be? Oh, that's a storyline that I would love for them to do with John Cena. Like, he goes on a losing streak and it puts over a few guys and he starts doubting himself. Or, the old Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio angle of where Eddie can beat everybody in the world except for Rey Mysterio. That's the only guy he can't beat, and it drives him nuts. Yeah, I mean, they did that for like 2 weeks. Remember after Cena lost to The Rock? Yeah. And then Lesnar attacked him, and they did that where Edge came out and told him to wake up, and there was all this concern that, Cena was losing it. That lasted like 2 weeks, and then he went and beat Lesnar, Lesnar's first pay-per-view match back in however many years that was. Yeah. Basic storytelling needs to return, just common sense storytelling. Yeah. And it's just not there. It's so weird. I don't know what's in Vince's mind, but things that just make sense to everyone else. Don't seem to because let's face it, Vince is still killing it on the business end. WWE is such a beast, you know, as a business, but creatively, it's one of the worst booked wrestling promotions I've seen since I've been a fan.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago, I thought that the 3-hour Raws were pretty tolerable, but that's when you had the Shield as an act. You had CM Punk still there. You had Daniel Bryan there on the regular. You had, and I mean, he was with Kane, which is one of the more entertaining tag teams in recent memory. And now it's a chore to get through 3 hours. And
all right, so you what's your top 3 WrestleMania matches? Assuming Rock can't do it, assuming you don't have Sting, you got Triple H, you got Taker. What do you think the top 3?
Triple H and Taker. I would like to see Triple H
and Lesnar.
Okay, and Lesnar. Brock, Undertaker, and Cena, I think would be a big one. Don't know if they'll do it, but that would have to be one. Man, I would like to see, honestly, I never thought I'd say this, but I would like to see Triple H in the title picture, because I think that could be like almost like an Eva Marie situation this week. Like, oh my gosh, they may actually put the belt on this person. I hope they don't do it. Save us, Roman Reigns or Bayley situation. So I would like to see maybe Roman Reigns win the title at the Royal Rumble, and Triple H, I don't want to see him win the Royal Rumble, but if he did, it'd be like, oh man, they're really going to do this. And then Brock Lesnar versus anybody. I don't know who it's so weird because there's going to be an odd man out.
I kind of agree with, because I kind of had those same matches in mind. You know what I thought was it'd be cool if, and they're not going to do this, but if they had the Royal Rumble, they have some controversy happen where the title is vacated, put up, the winner of the Royal Rumble wins the WWE title.
Yeah.
And you have Triple H come in as a surprise entrant and wins the Royal Rumble. He wins the WWE championship. And then you have Roman Reigns face Triple H, you know, for the title at Mania.
Yeah.
You do, Taker. There's no one else I could think of other than Cena.
Tyler Breeze, I think, would be Vince Russo's pick.
There you go, Tyler Breeze.
Problem solved.
I mean, if you kept Kevin Owens as a killer, you could have done him, but that's long gone.
Oh my! Imagine if Kevin Owens or Rusev had been booked the way that they originally were, and then either one of those guys could have faced Brock Lesnar at this show, and it would have been huge.
So now, realistically, you're left with really Taker and Cena, and then Lesnar. I don't know. I guess you'd have to do Sheamus. I can't think of who else would you go. I mean, who else is there?
And then and here's the thing.
Where's Ambrose? You know, I guess Ambrose would be like at the bottom.
I was gonna say poor Ambrose. Like, where's he at? If he had turned heel, he fits in almost any single one of those slots. If he had went heel and done the authority thing, he could have made a quick turn back and faced Triple H, or he could have faced Roman Reigns. Big first time ever non-screwy finish, him and Roman Reigns maybe. You could have put him even against Lesnar. I'm sure they could have had a great match. But I don't see them ever putting Ambrose against Lesnar. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll get so desperate. I'm sure it'd be a good match.
Yeah. I mean, you could do Ambrose and Owens. I don't think they're feuding now, so I don't think it'll last till Mania. But
what do you think attendance does at WrestleMania now?
Well, I don't think it was ever going to be configured to do 100,000 people, because you got the giant stage and everything. I mean, that blocks out 20,000 right there. So I think you're looking at a legit 85,000. And I think they'll still get up there. I think they'll do 80 to 85, but it's looking more and more like they don't have that, you know, rabbit to pull out of the hat.
Well, no, because Adam Rose cooked him and served him up in stew this week on SmackDown. Did you see that?
No, I did not. Adam SmackDown has become that DVR show I was talking about, where you start skipping it, and now I rarely watch it unless I hear it. And nothing happens on SmackDown. This week, if something actually happens, then I'll watch it. Like I watched Tyler Breeze debut, you know, and I'm not saying it's not a bad, you know, it's a bad show. It's just when you have, you know, 5 hours of WWE and 2 hours of Impact and what ROH and then MMA, it's just a lot of content.
MMA can be one of the most tedious things to cover. I'm so glad you had me do quick results of the prelims, because Man, that can be like 6-7 hour shows, but yeah, there's a lot of wrestling on every week, and Lucha Underground is on hiatus. Well, not hiatus, but they're
coming back.
Yeah, but yeah, Adam Rose brought rabbit stew to New Day's potluck last night, and it was actually really good. SmackDown, which I thought would be a cookie cutter show, had some backstage stuff. It was pretty fun last night. They had Heath Slater bringing Slater Slaw to the potluck, and it had a Band-Aid in it, and they flipped out. The Ascension brought Desolation and Destruction to the potluck and got kicked out because it wasn't actually food. There was some good stuff on the show.
I'm sure, but when they train you that it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't take long for fans to follow suit. You know what I mean?
And this brings me to one of my points. There was an outstanding main event, a triple threat match, Dean Ambrose, Tyler Breeze, Dolph Ziggler for #1 contendership of the Intercontinental title. No advertisement for it on Raw. No, hey, maybe watch this show that we do on Thursday nights because there's something important on the show. No, nothing like that. So why the hell would anybody watch it? Then nobody knows. Even say New Day's having a potluck. If you would have told me New Day was having a potluck on SmackDown, doesn't matter, I'm there.
Yeah, with this whole thing about, well, they're not focusing on it until they go to USA. Well, okay, but do you want to lose your whole, all your audience and then try to rebuild it? Or do you want to maintain your audience and then build from that? I mean, the whole idea that, we don't care about this show until it moves to USA it just seems like crap, because what's going to happen? And this is what happened. Anytime they change nights, you think that there's going to be a renewed focus, and ultimately they end up losing viewers anyway. When they move from Friday to Thursday, the fact that they didn't, keep an interest on SmackDown, and it's led to their lowest numbers ever.
Yeah.
So,
here's something potentially frightening. In January, Monday night Raw, Tuesday night Impact, Wednesday night Lucha Underground at NXT, Thursday night SmackDown, Friday night New Japan, the weekends Ring of Honor syndication, and whatever pay-per-views may be happening. That's every single day pretty much.
And UFC.
And then UFC. And technically Superstars is on Friday, but I mean, come on now.
Yeah. Well, something's got to give.
Yeah. That's a lot of wrestling. That's a whole lot of wrestling.
For such a cold niche. To think like there wasn't this much wrestling in the late 90s, when it was at its peak. You had Nitro, and I mean at its peak, you had Nitro, Raw, and then ECW. Yeah. Now you have, it's just out of control. The amount of wrestling
there were the B shows and stuff like Saturday Night and Main Event, like WCW
Sunday
Main
Night
Event
Heat.
and Heat and things like that. But there were a couple days, like Tuesdays, there was nothing. Friday ECW on TNN.
Yeah.
But it's Saturdays would have like Jacked and Metal, but nobody was watching that anyway.
They had WCW Saturday. I guess there was a lot of stuff, I guess, then too. But for as cold as wrestling is right now, man, I want to see it get back to where it can be, and it can be there. It's just incompetence right now at the creative level.
As I was looking through the YouTube, WWE's YouTube, to see what got the most hits, what had like 13 million hits? Yeah. Lana kissing Dolph Ziggler. And I was like, man, we crapped all over that. And apparently it did big numbers.
Hey, and they really followed up on that, didn't they?
Yeah. But then there were things like The Rock returning, anything with Brock Lesnar, the Nexus debut, WWE title matches that aired on Raw. Those got an exorbitant amount of hits. And you don't see that stuff very often. But I just find it weird that I see stuff on our comment boards that is far more creative than the things that are on that screen and work more and make more sense. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's troubling. And the scariest part of it is I don't see it changing anytime soon.
I don't either. Something I wanted to bring up before we went. I'm not sure if you had the opportunity to listen to the Jon Jones interview. Have you heard any of that yet?
No, not yet.
I think Thanksgiving week is starting to turn into shoot week because last year we had CM Punk. This year we have Jon Jones.
And that seemed like that was like 3 years ago, that CM Punk thing.
Yeah.
I hear that was last year. I'm like, holy crap.
I'll never forget that I was up at maybe, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and that podcast dropped, and I was like, well, there's no way I'm not covering this because, you know, everybody had been waiting to hear from CM Punk.
Right.
Similarly, in the MMA world, people have been waiting to really hear from Jon Jones, and man, he said some pretty wild stuff. He said, one, he's moving to heavyweight after a few fights. He said he's going to fight Cormier and Rumble Johnson. Then he wants to move to heavyweight. He said that the UFC wanted him to fight after his accident, and he said no, which was kind of surprising, and told the UFC he didn't care while using some expletives that he lost the UFC title, that he was ready to quit fighting. That was a pretty big shocker. So that Ronda Rousey offered to let him live in her beach house and really reached out to help him, which I wonder if that put her in an awkward position because a few months later, you know, she was getting beat by one of his teammates and he was helping formulate the game plan for that. He said, among other things, that Dana White is not genuine. He said that he sees Lorenzo Fertitta as genuine, but not Dana White. And he says that he thinks that the people should know the type of shenanigans that the UFC pulls, including knowing about Vitor Belfort being on steroids and not doing anything about it when he fought him. This guy is not towing the company line at all.
And you know what? Like with a scripted environment like pro wrestling, you could take something like that and have Cesaro do, you know, well, I guess not Cesaro now, but
a lot of people.
And have them do an interview with Rolling Stone and just rip on Vince and WWE, right? That would get so much attention. You could play that into a storyline, you know, like have it be an angle. But
I remember once upon a time there was a guy named CM Punk who did that, and it got quite a bit of attention.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had Dolph Ziggler do that, and then, you know, announce on Raw that he's suspended, or, you know, and then just build from that, you know, it'd be something different, something interesting. Yeah. It'd get people wondering, and but no.
I'm almost surprised that WWE hasn't tried to make their own, like Brock Lesnar, like have a guy go do a couple MMA fights, probably not UFC level, but I mean, there are some heavyweights around that they could find that would absolutely lose to some of the guys that they have, like a Del Rio or a Jack Swagger, anybody that has any semblance of wrestling. But it's hard to recreate that. There's, you know, Matt Riddle's coming up, and apparently WWE has their thumb on him, but he's not as big as Brock Lesnar physically. He's like a 230-pound guy. It's going to be hard for them to recreate people like The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar once they're gone.
Especially when they don't protect anyone.
Yeah.
You could do it if you had the right booking, you know?
Oh gosh, they'd have Matt Riddle tap out to like a Boston Crab on week 3.
Yeah, they have him, you know, give him they'd give him Tyler Breeze's gimmick, and you know, you'll see where that goes. So
oh man. Yeah, a guy who legitimately has not lost an MMA fight for 4 years, but apparently they have their eye on him, and he's training at the Monster Factory, and that's probably one of the.
He's got a lot of charisma. He's you know, he could be a huge star.
Oh gosh, do you remember his promo on the English People?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that was one of my favorite UFC interviews of all time.
Yeah, no, the guy. I mean, but there's a huge difference between being able to shoot off the cuff and being in a scripted environment with 30 guys who apparently don't know how to change promos for each wrestler's style. You know, it's like the same type of style for every wrestler that they write for. So anyway.
I would love to see a group photo of the WWE writing staff to see how many of them are like dorky 30-something white guys without girlfriends, because that's what it seems like when they write this, that there is no difference in ethnicity, gender, or age.
You know, I've talked to so many guys on the creative staff over the years, or former writers and things like that, and they know what's wrong. And ultimately, everything gets shot down. You hear all these great ideas that these guys had that never see the light of day because Vince just shoots them down, and you get stuck with the same old. So I give the writers a break a lot, because
that's true.
It's even though I don't see Raw last Monday and lately, it's pretty much all wrestling. Outside from the opening promo, there aren't many backstage things. So it's like you got 30 guys writing that opening promo because you're not writing the match. So, you know what?
That falls on the agents. The agents kind of script that out, and and maybe I was a little too harsh on the writers. I spoke.
No, but absolutely. I mean, you look at the that Ziggler Rusev thing. I mean, it's exactly what you said. It looks like guys that have never had a girlfriend that don't know how relationships work. Like Summer Rae just walking to Rusev backstage and all, and that makes them a couple. And
I'm like, who's supposed to be the bad guy in this situation? Lana was like, I mean, Rusev was a jerk to Lana. Then Lana tried to make him jealous. Then Summer Rae was sleeping around with everybody. And Dolph Ziggler was just some scumbag picking up on a rebound girl. Like, who's the good person in this situation? I don't understand that.
Yeah, and this whole thing with Total Divas, I said it on the podcast a couple months ago. They could have turned that into a killer angle with Cena. With Ziggler and Cena, made it keep a lot of the stuff outside the ring. And yeah, I don't know, man.
I will say one thing.
Dark spot.
I'll say one thing. After watching NXT this week, and I'm not sure what the NXT spoilers did as far as traffic, but I know that on Twitter there was just an obscene amount of attention because of the Eva Marie Bayley match. Eva Marie is garbage in the ring, but she is just a fantastic heel because making people care is half the battle. People care. People hate her. And when that was announced, the Bayley versus Eva Marie match, there was just this. I watched the match on Periscope. There were people periscoping the match live, and I watched it. I was ready. I wanted to find out who won that match. They don't have that for anybody as a heel on the main roster. They don't have anybody that people genuinely hate. They have guys that people genuinely don't want to see, but that's it.
Yeah. No, it's weird. Absolutely. All right, man. Well, this was I'm glad we tried this out. A little special bonus podcast for this week.
Absolutely.
And let's try to do a live one on Monday.
Absolutely, guys. I think Monday, if all goes according to plan, you're able to give us live feedback and stuff like that on Twitter and maybe even here. I'm not sure how that works out. But we definitely hope that you enjoyed this live edition of the Wrestling Inc. podcast, and check us out again Monday.
All right. Take care, guys.